9.3, using the quadratic formula to solve equations, practice solutions. So for our first example, we're given 10x plus 4 is equal to 6x squared. We are going to get everything on the same side as that 6x squared. So we're going to subtract the 10x from each side. We're also going to subtract that 4 from each side to give us 6x squared minus 10x minus 4 is equal to 0. So from here, our A is 6, our B is negative 10, our C is negative 4. Remember, you're using x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times A times C all over 2 times A. So plugging this in, we have x is equal to a negative times negative 10 plus or minus the square root of negative 10 squared minus 4 times 6 times negative 4 all over 2 times 6. So to simplify this, those two negatives become positives. So it's going to be x is equal to 10 plus or minus the square root. That negative 100, that negative 10 squared is 100. The negative 4 times 6 is negative 24. If we multiply that by negative 4, we get a positive 96. And this is all over 12. So from here, we're going to add that 100 and that 96. So x is equal to 10 plus or minus the square root of 196 all over 12. Now that 196 is divisible by 2. The 2 goes into 19 9 times with 18, so there's 1 left over. 2 goes into 16 8 times, so that's 98. 2 goes into that as well. The 2 goes into 9 4 times with 1 left over. The 2 goes into 18 9 times, so that's 49. That's 7 and 7, so 7 times 2 is 14. So x is equal to 10 plus or minus 14 all over 12. We're going to simplify this into two equations, and we have x is equal to 10 minus 14 over 12, as well as x is equal to 10 plus 14 over 12. So we're going to simplify the top. We get x is equal to negative 4 over 12, as well as x is equal to 24 over 12. So then simplifying this even further, we have x is equal to negative 1/3, and x is equal to 2. For 10, we're given x squared plus x minus 20 is equal to 0. So for this one, our A is 1, our B is 1, and our C is negative 20. So plugging this into our quadratic formula, we're going to have x is equal to a negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 1 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 20 all over 2 times 1. So this is going to be x is equal to negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 1 plus 80. The 4 times negative the negative 4 times negative 20 is a positive 80. So that's 1 plus 80 underneath that radical. That's going to simplify to be x is equal to negative 1 plus or minus 9 over 2. So again, we're going to separate this into two equations. So x is equal to negative 1 minus 9 over 2, and x is equal to negative 1 plus 9 over 2. This is going to leave us with x is equal to negative 10 over 2, as well as x is equal to 8 over 2. So our two solutions for this one is x is equal to negative 5, as well as x is equal to 4. For 11, we have 4x squared is equal to 4 minus x. So we're going to subtract this 4. We're going to add the x to bring them to the other side. So we're going to be left with 4x squared plus x minus 4 is equal to 0. Our A is 4, our B is 1, and our C is negative 4. So we have x is equal to a negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 1 squared minus 4 times negative 4 all over 2 times 4. So we're going to be left with x is equal to negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 1 plus 4 times 4 is 16 times 4 is 64 all over 8. So this is going to simplify to be x is equal to negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 65 all over 8. That 65 is 5 and 13. We can't simplify that, so this is our answer. For 12, we're given 9x squared plus 3x minus 2 is equal to 0. So our A is 9, our B is 3, our C is negative 2. So this is going to give us x is equal to negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 3 squared minus 4 times 9 times negative 2 all over 2 times 9. So x is equal to negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 9. The negative 4 times the negative 2 is a positive 8 times 9 is 72. So 9 plus 72 underneath that radical, and this is all over 18. This simplifies to be x is equal to negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 81 over 18. So then we're going to simplify this even further. X is equal to negative 3 plus or minus 9 over 18. We separate this into two equations. X is equal to negative 3 minus 9 over 18, and x is equal to negative 3 plus 9 over 18. So we simplify to get x is equal to negative 12 over 18, and x is equal to 6 over 18. When we simplify these even further, we're going to get x is equal to negative 4 over 6, which is also negative 2 over 3, and x is equal to 1/3. For our next example or next question, we are given 14x plus 3 is equal to negative x squared. We're going to add that 8x squared to both sides. And we're going to have 8x squared plus 14x plus 3 is equal to 0. So our A is the 8, our B is the 14, and our C is the 3. So plugging this all into our quadratic equation, we have quadratic formula. X is equal to negative 14 plus or minus the square root of 14 squared minus 4 times 8 times 3 all over 2 times 8. Okay, so we're going to have x is equal to negative 14 plus or minus the square root of 196 minus the 4 times 3 is 12 times 8 is 96, and it's going to stay negative because only one of those numbers is negative, and then 2 times 8 is 16. From here, the 196 minus the 96 gives us 100, so we're going to have x is equal to negative 14 plus or minus the square root of 100 all over 16. The square root of 100 is 10, so x is equal to negative 14 plus or minus 10 over 16. We simplify this and turn it into two equations, so we have x is equal to negative 14 minus 10 over 16, as well as x is equal to negative 14 plus 10 over 16. Pull that up a little bit, so x is equal to negative 24 over 16, as well as x is equal to a negative 4 over 16. For this negative 24 and the 16 are both divisible by 8, so x is equal to negative 3 over 2, as well as x is equal to negative 1/4. For 14, we're given x squared plus 3x squared plus 1 is equal to 0. So the first thing we're going to do with this one is combine like terms. So this is going to leave us with 4x squared plus 1 is equal to 0. Our A is the 4, our B is 0 because we don't have an x, and our C is the 1. So x is equal to negative b, so that's 0. We don't have to have anything there. Plus or minus the square root of 0 squared minus 4 times 4 times 1 all over 2 times 4. If we simplify this one step further, we have x is equal to plus or minus the square root of 0 minus 16 all over 8. The 0 minus 18 is negative 16, so x is equal to plus or minus the square root of negative 16 over 8. We cannot take the square root of a negative, so this is no solution. For 19, we have a squared plus 0.7a minus 0.1 is equal to 10. So in this case, our a is going to be 1, our b is 0.7, and our c is negative 0.1. We can plug this into our quadratic formula. X is equal to a negative 0.7 plus or minus the square root of 0.7 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 0.1 all over 2 times 1. From here, we're going to have x is equal to negative 0.7 plus or minus the square root of 0.49 minus the negative 4 times the negative 0.1 is going to be a positive, and then this is going to be a 0.4 all over 2. From here, we add underneath that radical, and we're going to have x is equal to negative 0.7 plus or minus the square root of 0.89 all over 2. You cannot simplify this any further, so we will leave it just like this. For 20, we are given 3x squared minus 1.8x plus 0.03 is equal to 0. For this one, our a is 3, our b is the negative 1.8, and our c is the 0.03. So if we plug this into our formula, we have x is equal to a negative times negative 1.8 plus or minus the square root of negative 1.8 squared minus 4 times 3 times 0.03 all over 2 times 3. All right, so simplifying this, these negatives are going to turn into a positive. We are going to have x is equal to 1.8 plus or minus the square root of that negative 1.8 squared gives us 3.24 minus 4 times 3 is 12 times 0.03 gives us 0.36 all over 6. If we simplify this, that 3.24 minus 0.36 gives us 2.88. So this is x is equal to 1.8 plus or minus the square root of 2.88 all over 6. For 21, we have 4r squared is equal to 0.6r plus 0.5. So we're going to subtract the 0.6r and the 0.5 from each side. And this is going to leave us with 4r squared minus 0.6r minus 0.5 is equal to 0. So our a is the 4, our b is the negative 0.6, and our c is the negative 0.5. So this is going to be x is equal to a negative times negative 0.6 plus or minus the square root of negative 0.6 squared minus 4 times negative 0.5 all over 2 times 4. So from here, those two negatives turn into a positive, so x is equal to 0.6 plus or minus the square root of that negative 0.6 squared is 0.36 minus the negative 4 times 4 is negative 16 times negative 0.5 is a positive 8 all over 8. So from here, we add underneath that radical, so x is equal to 0.6 plus or minus the square root of 8.36 all over 8. With that radical, that 8.36, we can divide this by 2. If we do, we're going to have 4.18. That 4.18 is divisible by 2. 2 goes into 4 twice. We have 0 and then 9, so 2.09. So because we can factor out those two 2's, this is going to be x is equal to 0.6 plus or minus 2 square root 2.09 all over 8. The 0.6, the 2, and the 8 are all divisible by 2. So this is going to simplify to be x is equal to 0.3 plus or minus the square root of 2.09 all over 4. For 22, we have t squared plus 3 over 2t plus 2/3 is equal to 0. So I want to start by getting rid of my fractions. By doing this, I'm going to multiply by my least common denominator here, which is 6. So this is going to leave me with 6t squared plus 9t plus 6 is equal to 0. Oh, sorry, this is not a 6, this is a 4. Plus 4 plus 4 is equal to 0. Okay, so my A is 6, my B is 9, my C is 4. So I'm going to plug this into our formula. We're going to have x is equal to negative 9 plus or minus the square root of 9 squared minus 4 times A, which is 6, times C, which is 4, all over 2 times 6. So this is simplifying to be x is equal to negative 9 plus or minus the square root of 81. The negative 4 times 6 is negative 24 times 4 gives us negative 96 all over 12. So we're going to simplify this. The 81 minus the 96 gives us negative 15 underneath that radical. So x is equal to negative 9 plus or minus the square root of negative 15 all over 12. We cannot take the square root of a negative, so this is no solution. For 23, we are given 2c squared plus 1/2 c plus 2/3 is equal to 0. So I'm going to multiply everything by my least common denominator, which is 6. So we're going to get 12c squared plus 3c plus the 3 and the 6 simplified to become a 2 and a 1. So 2 times 2 is 4 is equal to 0. So our A is 12, our B is 3, and our C is 4. So x is equal to negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 3 squared minus 4 times 12 times 4 all over 2 times 12. We're going to simplify this. We're going to get x is equal to negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 9 minus the 4 times 12 is 48. If we multiply that by 12, we get a negative 192 all over 24. The 9 minus the 192 gives us a negative 183, so x is equal to negative 3 plus or minus the square root of negative 183 all over 24. We cannot take the square root of that negative, so this is also no solution. For 24, we have x plus 1 over x is equal to 3 over x plus 3. So our least common denominator here is x, so we're going to multiply everything by x. So we're going to have x squared plus 1 is equal to 3 plus 3x. We're going to move the 3x over by subtracting it. We're also going to move the 3 over by subtracting it. So this is going to leave us with x squared minus 3x minus 2 is equal to 0. So our A is 1, our B is negative 3, and our C is negative 2. So plugging this in, we have x is equal to a negative times negative 3 plus or minus the square root of negative 3 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 2 all over 2 times 1. Those two negatives in front of the 3 become a positive, so this is going to be x is equal to 3 plus or minus the square root. That negative 3 squared is 9 minus the negative 4 times 1 is negative 4 times negative 2 is a positive 8 all over 2. If we add the 9 and the 18, that gives us 17, so x is equal to 3 plus or minus the square root of 17 all over 2 is our solution. For 25, we're given 3 over 2x squared plus 1/3 x plus 2/3 is equal to 0. So we're going to multiply everything by our least common denominator, which in this case is 6 once again. So this is going to be 3 times 3 x squared, so 9x squared. The 3 and the 6 become 1 and 2, so 2 times 1 is 2x. And then the 3 and the 6 once more become a 1 and a 2, so 2 times 2 is 4 is equal to 0. So our A is 9, our B is 2, and our C is 4. So this is going to leave us with x is equal to -2 plus or minus the square root of 2 squared minus 4 times 9 times 4 all over 2 times 9. So simplifying this even further, we have x is equal to -2 plus or minus the square root of 4. The -4 times 9 is -36 times 4 gives us a -144 all over 18. If we subtract this, and underneath that radical, we have x is equal to -2 plus or minus the square root of -140 all over 18. We cannot take the square root of that negative, so again, we have no solution. For our next example, we have 1/3 minus 2 over 2y plus 1 is equal to 3 over y. So our least common denominator with all of this is the 3, the y, and the 2y plus 1. So we're going to multiply all of this by 6y squared plus 3y. Okay, so when we do this, the 3 is getting rid of the 3 and the 3y, so it's just y times 2y plus 1 being multiplied by the 1/3. So 2y squared plus 1 times 1 is 2y squared plus 1. Then we have the 2y plus 1 being taken out of that, so that's just the 3y times the -2, so that's -6y is equal to, and then for the next one, the last one on the right side of that equal sign, it's just the the y that's getting taken out of the 3y times 2y plus 1. So we're multiplying it by 6y plus 3. So this is going to become 6y times 6y plus 3. So this is going to become 18y plus 9. Okay, so we're going to move everything over to get this set equal to 0. We're going to subtract the 18y from each side. We're going to subtract the 9 from each side. Write it in standard form. So 2y squared. Then you have the -6y minus the 18y is going to give us -24y minus 1 minus 9 gives us the -8 is equal to 0. So from here, our A is 2, our B is -24, and our C is -8. So plugging this into our formula, we have x is equal to a negative times -24 plus or minus the square root of -24 squared minus 4 times 2 times -8 all over 2 times 2. So your two negatives next to each other turn into positives, so x is equal to 24 plus or minus the square root of 24 squared gives us 576 plus, because the negative times the positive, we have 8 times 8 is 64 all over 4. So when we add the 576 and the 64, we're going to get x is equal to 24 plus or minus the square root of 640 all over 4. That 640 is going to be 64 and 10. This 64 is 8 and 8. The 10 is 2 and 5. So 8 square root of 10. So x is equal to 24 plus or minus 8 square root 10 all over 4. We're going to simplify this by dividing all of these by 4 to get x is equal to 6 plus or minus, here, let's rewrite this. X is equal to 6 plus or minus 2 square root 10. At this point here in that red that I just put the arrow towards, you could have simplified that as well and worked with smaller numbers if you wanted to and divided everything by 2. So your A was 1, your B is negative 12, and your C is the negative 8. So that way you weren't doing the 24 squared, you would have been doing the 12 squared. So again, totally up to you if you wanted to do that. You would have gotten the same exact answer. For 27, you have 3x over x plus 2 minus x plus 1 over x minus 1 is equal to 0. Your least common denominator between these two is the x plus 2 times x minus 1. So this first fraction, you'd multiply x minus 1 by your numerator. Second would be x plus 2. So we're going to have 3x squared minus 3x minus, put parentheses around it because you're not distributing that negative in yet. You're going to have to do that after. The x times x is x squared. X times 2 is going to give us 2x. The 1 times x is x, and the 1 times 2 is 2, is equal to 0. We distribute that negative in. We're going to have 3x squared minus 3x minus x squared. The 2x plus x is 3x. So negative times 3x is a negative 3x minus 2 is equal to 0. So from here, we're going to combine like terms. The 3x squared minus x squared is 2x squared. The negative 3x minus 3x is negative 6x. And then that minus 2 is equal to 0. So our A is 2, our B is negative 6, and our C is negative 2. We're going to plug these values in to get x is equal to a negative times negative 6 plus or minus the square root of negative 6 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 2 all over 2 times 2. So your two negatives become a positive 6 plus or minus the square root of 36. The negative 4 times 2 is negative 8 times negative 2 is a positive 16 all over 2 times 2, which is 4. Your 36 plus the 16 is going to give you the square root of 52. So x is equal to 6 plus or minus the square root of 52 all over 4. That square root of 52, you can do 2 and 26. The 26 is 2 and 13. So this is going to simplify to be x is equal to 6 plus or minus 2 square root 13 all over 4. You can divide all the 6, the 4, and the 2 by 2 to get x is equal to 3 plus or minus the square root of 13 over 2. For 28, you have w plus 3 over w minus 1 minus 7 over w plus 5 is equal to 3. So your least common denominator for this one is that w minus 1 times w plus 5. So this first fraction, we're going to multiply w plus 5. Second, we're going to multiply w minus 1. Remember, it's negative 7 times w minus 1, so we're taking that negative with the 7 and distributing it in. So we're going to have w squared plus 3w plus 5w plus 15 minus 7w plus 7 is equal to 3 times the w squared, which this is, if we FOIL it, w squared plus 4w minus 5. So we're going to multiply the 3 times the w squared. So it's w squared, 3w squared plus 12w minus 15. All right, so we're going to combine like terms on the left side. We're going to be getting w squared, the 3w, the 5w, and the negative 7w. It gives us 8w minus 7w, so that's plus w. And then the 15 plus 7 gives us 22. and this is going to be equal to the 3w squared plus 12w minus 15. Now, my 3w squared is greater than w squared, so I'm going to move this w squared over to the 3w squared by subtracting it. I'm going to subtract the w from both sides as well, and I'm going to subtract the 22 from both sides as well. So these are all going to cancel. We're going to have 2w squared plus 11w, minus 37. All right, so this is going to be equal to 0. So our A is 2, our B is 11, and our C is negative 37. Plugging this in, we're going to have x is equal to negative 11 plus or minus the square root of 11 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 37 all over 2 times 2. So x is equal to negative 11 plus or minus the square root of 121 plus 8 times 37 gives us 296 all over 4. From here, the 121 plus the 296 gives us 417. So x is equal to negative 11 plus or minus the square root of 417 all over 4. For our next example, we have z squared plus 7z plus 3 is equal to 0. So this one's an easy one. Our A is 1, our B is 7, our C is 3. We're going to have x is equal to negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 7 squared minus 4 times 1 times 3 all over 2 times 1. So simplifying this, x is equal to negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 49 minus 12 all over 2. That 49 minus 12 gives us 37. So x is equal to negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 37 all over 2. For 32, we have w squared plus 8w minus 4. So our A is 1, our B is 8, and our C is negative 4. So x is equal to negative 8 plus or minus the square root of 8 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 4 all over 2 times 1. Simplifying this, we have x is equal to negative 8 plus or minus the square root of 64 plus 16 all over 2. So x is equal to negative 8 plus or minus the square root of 64 plus 16 is 80 all over 2. That 80 is 4 and 20. The 20 is 4 and 5, so that's 4 square root 5. So x is equal to negative 8 plus or minus 4 square root 5 all over 2. We're going to simplify this to be x is equal to negative 4 plus or minus 2 square root 5. For 33, we have 2u squared minus 10u minus 6 is equal to 0. So again, this is what I was saying, where we can divide everything by 2 here, since everything's divisible by 2, to get u squared minus 5u minus 3 is equal to 0. So our A is 1, our B is negative 5, and our C is negative 3. So we're going to have x is equal to negative times negative 5 plus or minus the square root of negative 5 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 3 all over 2 times 1. This is going to leave us with x is equal to 5 plus or minus the square root of 25 plus 12 all over 2. The 25 plus 12 is going to give us 37. So x is equal to 5 plus or minus the square root of 37 over 2. For 34, we're given 5y squared is equal to negative 9y minus 1. So we are going to add that 9y over and the 1 to both sides and be left with 5y squared plus 9y plus 1 is equal to 0. So our A is 5, our B is 9, and our C is 1. So x is equal to negative 9 plus or minus the square root of 9 squared minus 4 times 5 times 1 all over 2 times 5. So x is equal to negative 9 plus or minus the square root of 81 minus 20 all over 10. The 81 minus 20 is going to give us 61, so x is equal to negative 9 plus or minus the square root of 61 all over 10. For 35, we have 3k squared plus 2 is equal to 5k. We subtract that 5k from both sides, and we're left with 3k squared minus 5k plus 2 is equal to 0. Our A is 3, our B is negative 5, and our C is 2. So x is equal to negative times negative 5 plus or minus the square root of negative 5 squared minus 4 times 3 times 2 all over 2 times 3. So x is equal to 5 plus or minus the square root of 25. The 4 times 3 is 12, times 2 is 24, so that's minus 24 all over 6. So this is going to simplify to be x is equal to 5 plus or minus the square root of 1 all over 6. The square root of 1 is 1, so x is equal to 5 plus or minus 1 over 6 is going to give us x is equal to 5 minus 1 over 6, as well as x is equal to 5 plus 1 over 6. So we have x is equal to 4 over 6, as well as x is equal to 6 over 6. So we're going to have two solutions here of x is equal to 2/3, as well as x is equal to 1. For 36, we have 6m is equal to 3 minus 2m squared. I'm going to add this 2m squared to both sides, as well as subtract the 3 from each side to give us 2m squared plus 6m minus 3 is equal to 0. Our A is 2, our B is 6, our C is negative 3. So x is equal to negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 6 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 3 all over 2 times 2. So we have x is equal to negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 36. The negative 4 times 2 is negative 8. Negative 8 times negative 3 is a positive 24 all over 4. X is equal to negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 36 plus 24. The 4 and the 6 is 10. Carry the 1, that's a 60 all over 4. The 60 is 2 and 30. The 30 is 2 and 15. So it's 2 square root 15. So x is equal to negative 6 plus or minus 2 square root 15 all over 4. We can divide this all by 2 and get x is equal to negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 15 all over 2. For our last three, we have x squared plus 0.3x minus 0.2 is equal to 0. Another way of doing these is to get rid of your decimals. So you could multiply everything by the greatest decimal place that you have here, which is just 1. So that's the 10th place. That would be a 10 that you're multiplying everything by. So this would give you 10x squared plus 3x minus 2 is equal to 0. Now you're working with whole numbers, so it makes your life a lot easier. Your A is 10, your B is 3, your C is negative 2. So if we plug this into our formula, we're going to have x is equal to negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 3 squared minus 4 times 10 times negative 2 all over 2 times 10. So x is equal to negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 9 plus 40 times 2 is 80 all over 20. So we're going to have x is equal to negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 89 all over 20. For 38, we're given n squared plus 2/3 n minus 1/2 is equal to 0. So our least common denominator here is 6. We'd multiply everything by 6 to give us 6n squared, plus the 6 and the 3 simplified become 1 and 2, so 2 times 2n is 4n. The negative 1/2 times 6 is negative 3 is equal to 0. So our a is 6, our b is 4, our c is negative 3. So x is equal to negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 4 squared minus 4 times 6 times negative 3 all over 2 times 6. So we're going to simplify this one even further now. So x is equal to negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 16. The negative 4 times 6 is 24, and negative 24. And the negative 24 times negative 3 gives us a positive 72. All over 2 times 6, which is 12. If we add the 16 and the 72, that's going to give us an 88. So x is equal to negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 88 all over 12. That 88 is 8 and 11. The 11 doesn't simplify, but the 8 is a 2 and 4. The 4 is 2 and 2, so that's 2 square root 22. So x is equal to negative 4 plus or minus 2 square root 22 all over 12. The negative 4, the 2, and the 12 are divisible by 2, so x is equal to negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 22 all over 6. For 39, our last one, we have 1/2 y squared minus 7 over 2y is equal to 1. I'm going to start by subtracting this 1 from each side, so that way everything's on the same side together. And this is equal to 0. I am going to multiply everything by my least common denominator, which is 2. The 2 times 1/2 y squared is y squared. The 2 times negative 7 over 2y is just negative 7y. And the 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. So then from here, my a is 1, my b is negative 7, and my c is negative 2. So x is equal to negative times negative 7 plus or minus the square root of negative 7 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 2 all over 2 times 1. From here, those two negatives are going to become positives, so x is equal to 7 plus or minus the square root of 49. The negative 2 times negative 8 is a positive, negative 4 times negative 2 is a positive 8. This is all going to be over 2. So from here, we have the 49 plus 8, which is 57, so x is equal to 7 plus or minus the square root of 57 all over 2.